A cold wind swept through Denver that day, carrying with it the sting of winter and the loneliness of a city winding down before another snowstorm. People hurried across the streets, heads tucked into scarves, gloves clutching cheap cups of steaming coffee. Street vendors packed up their carts early, their voices fading under the whine of sirens in the distance. The sky above was heavy, swollen with the promise of snow, and the whole city seemed caught in a breathless pause. It was in that quiet, beneath the flickering buzz of neon and the rattling hum of traffic lights, that fate placed Ethan Cole exactly where he was meant to be. Lieutenant Ethan Cole, tall and lean, stepped out of his cruiser with the easy movement of a man who had seen too much to be surprised by anything anymore. His storm-gray eyes carried the sharpness of a man trained never to miss details, but behind them lay a weight, a grief he had never put down. His sheriff's coat, thick and navy, clung tightly against the bitter chill, its collar pulled up around his jaw. He looked like someone built out of silence and steel, a man who never invited strangers in, but carried his pain like part of his duty. For 3 long years that pain had taken shape in one word: Max, his partner. His canine, his brother in everything but blood. 3 years since that warehouse explosion had swallowed the only soul he trusted completely. They told him Max had died instantly. They never found remains. Just smoke, fire, and silence. Ethan refused another partner after that. Because Max wasn't just a dog, he was family. And family isn't replaced. That's why, when Ethan's gaze fell on the sight across the street, his heartbeat stumbled. Beneath the tired neon of a pawn shop, a man in a cracked leather jacket leaned against the wall, shifting nervously from foot to foot. His skin was pale, stretched thin, and crawling with tattoos, snakes coiling, skulls grinning, flames licking up arms that looked more bone than muscle. His jaw ticked like he was chewing something invisible, a restless twitch that marked him as the kind of man who survived on schemes and bad choices. At his feet, laid out on a filthy wool blanket, was a German shepherd. Ethan's steps slowed to almost nothing. His eyes locked on the animal, and something inside him froze. The dog was massive, larger than the average working-line shepherd. Its body weighed down not only by muscle but by years of surviving battles Ethan could only imagine. Its coat, scarred and mottled, bore the dark shadow of soot black blending into tarnished gold along the ribs. Hair thinned in patches where burns had once licked flesh, old scars carved deep into its hide, like someone had tried to erase its past but failed. One proud ear stood erect while the other drooped like it had lost the will. Its tail, crooked and stiff, looked like it had once been broken. Yet none of that compared to its eyes. Amber, hollow, a light dimmed but not completely gone. They didn't flinch in fear. They didn't gleam with aggression. They were vacant. And somehow in that vacancy, Ethan recognized a ghost. A sign sat propped in front of the man. Purebred German Shepherd. $200. No papers. No refunds. Ethan crossed the street, boots crunching over the salted pavement, until he stood before the tattooed stranger. The man, later identified as Kenny Drake, small-time troublemaker with more loitering charges than real crimes, flashed a thin grin that didn't reach his eyes. "You selling that dog?" Ethan asked, his voice calm but carrying an edge that hinted he wasn't just another passerby. "Yep," Kenny rasped, lips cracked, voice rough from cold air and cheap smoke. "Found him by the rail yard a couple nights ago. Been feeding him scraps. Figured someone might want him." Ethan ignored the words and crouched slowly, lowering himself to the dog's level. He kept his eyes steady, careful not to startle. But the shepherd didn't move, didn't blink, didn't sniff. It was like staring into stone. Even abused dogs usually twitched, sniffed, or shifted when a hand hovered near. "This one?" "Nothing. What's his name?" Ethan asked. Kenny shrugged. "Didn't come with one." "I've been calling him Bruiser." Ethan barely heard him. His attention had snagged on the thick patch of uneven fur around the dog's neck. Coarse hair that looked like it had grown back over a wound. The tilt of the head, slight but unmistakable. It wasn't possible. "And yet," he whispered without even thinking. "Max!" The dog didn't leap, didn't whine, didn't wag its tail, but its left ear twitched. Just a flicker. Just enough. And Ethan's chest tightened like someone had wrapped a fist around his heart. He rose and looked at Kenny. 200 cash? Kenny grinned, more eager now. Cash works. You got papers? Ethan pressed. Kenny barked out a laugh, quick and sharp. Man, I said no papers. A dog like this don't come with a family tree. Ethan pulled his wallet, thumbed through bills, and peeled off 10 crisp 20s. Kenny snatched the money with greedy fingers, tucking it away like a scavenger who'd struck gold. Enjoy the beast, he muttered, already striding off down the street, coat flapping like the ragged cape of a dime store villain. Ethan stood in the falling snow, staring at the shepherd. For a long beat, the dog didn't move. Then Ethan gave a gentle tug on the leash, and with stiff, deliberate effort, the dog rose. Its legs carried the weight of old injuries, stiffened muscles, yet there was still strength in every step. Something unbroken, something waiting. They walked together to the cruiser. Ethan opened the back door and nodded toward the seat. The shepherd hesitated, then jumped inside without a single sound. Ethan slid into the driver's seat and glanced at the mirror. The dog curled on the seat, eyes blank, but watching him now. Aware, present. Snowflakes drifted onto the windshield, melting as the heater hummed to life. "You're not him," Ethan whispered, jaw tight. "You can't be." The shepherd blinked once. "But you look like him." Too damn much. He didn't know why he said it. Maybe because grief needed a voice. Maybe because some part of him still believed miracles existed. Or maybe because of that ear twitch. The same twitch he had memorized years ago. Whatever it was, he knew in his gut this was not just a stray, not just a rescue. This was the beginning of something he couldn't name yet. The road home carried them out of the city, into quiet suburbs where snow-dusted pines stood sentinel and wide yards lay hushed under winter's blanket. Ethan's house came into view. Simple, single-story, wood-paneled. Too much space for one man, but too full of memories to abandon. Inside, warmth greeted them, though the air still held the faint scent of cedar smoke and emptiness. The walls were plain, adorned with only 2 framed photos. One of Ethan in his younger uniform days, the other of Max as a playful pup, ears lopsided, tongue caught mid-bark. Time had not touched those photos. It had only changed the man who hung them. The shepherd stepped over the threshold cautiously, paws pressing against the hardwood with the hesitation of a soldier stepping onto familiar ground, scarred by war. No wag of a tail, no burst of curiosity, only slow, measured steps. His eyes landed on the fireplace, on the mantel where a box sat. Inside that box, Max's folded vest, collar, and canine badge sealed beneath glass. The shepherd stared for a long moment, then turned away. "Max," Ethan said softly, almost pleading. Still nothing. He crouched low, fingers brushing the dog's matted coat until they found what he was searching for. A small raised scar along the neck. He pushed aside the hair. Beneath it, faded but undeniable, a tattoo inked in gray-blue. K9 7D611. His heart clenched. It was real. It was Max. Or what was left of him. Hands trembling, Ethan retrieved a scanner from the hallway drawer, an old relic from his K9 days. He swept it along the shepherd's neck and shoulders. Silence. No signal. Either the chip was gone or destroyed. Setting it aside, Ethan returned to the floor, lowering himself until he was eye-level with the dog. His hand rested against the scarred chest. "Do you remember this place?" His voice cracked against the quiet. "Do you remember me?" The shepherd's nose moved, brushing Ethan's wrist, then his badge. For a heartbeat, something flickered in the animal's gaze. Its ears twitched, and it pressed its nose gently against the sheriff's badge. But just as quickly as it appeared, the spark vanished. The dog pulled back, lowered itself to the rug, and lay down, resting its chin across its paws, amber eyes drifting half shut. Ethan's throat tightened. It was like looking at a photograph that refused to come into focus. Everything about this dog screamed Max body language, posture, scars, but the soul inside seemed locked. He stood, went to the kitchen, and filled a bowl with warm water and a handful of leftover chicken from his fridge. When he returned, the dog didn't jump or beg. It only stood, walked to the bowl, and began to eat quietly. That mechanical calm worried him more than any aggression would have. Later, as dusk pulled long shadows across the walls, Ethan picked up his phone and tapped in a number he hadn't used in months. The call rang twice. Then a woman's voice answered, sharp, focused, a hint of dry wit in the tone. "Cole, either you're dying or you found something stupid and brought it home." He smiled faintly. Both might be true. The voice belonged to Dr. Anna Brooks, a veterinary neurologist and one of the country's top experts in behavioral trauma in animals. In her late 30s, Anna was tall and slim with sharp cheekbones, hazel eyes, and an energy that always bordered between curiosity and frustration. She wore her brown hair tied up in a bun that always came loose by the end of her shift. Ethan had known her since academy days, back when she worked part-time with the K-9 unit as a med student. She wasn't warm exactly, but she cared, and she didn't miss much. "I need you to come out here," Ethan said. "Tonight, if possible." "That serious?" He looked at the dog, now asleep by the fire. "It's Max. At least I think it is." There was silence on the line. "Then I'm on my way." Ethan hung up and moved toward the den. He opened an old storage trunk and pulled out Max's training gear, an aged black collar, a chew rope, and a ballistic vest. He placed items on the floor one by one in front of the shepherd. The dog opened its eyes. Its gaze lingered on the vest. Then it stood, sniffed the collar, and nothing. No tail wag, no paw raise, not even a flinch, just a tired blink. Ethan sat on the couch, elbows on his knees, staring. He whispered again, "Where did you go, buddy?" The only answer was the soft crackle of the fire. Night fell hard over the outskirts of Denver. The pine trees that surrounded Ethan Cole's property swayed gently in the wind, casting crooked shadows over the snow-blanketed yard. The porch light buzzed faintly above the front door, flickering every so often like a nervous heartbeat. Inside the house, the fire had died down to glowing embers, and the air smelled of pine smoke and old leather. Max lay by the window, head resting between his front paws, unmoved even by the sound of crickets outside. His copper eyes remained blank, distant. He didn't twitch at the rustling in the brush, didn't lift his head when a fox dashed across the yard. For a former K-9 trained to react to the faintest disturbance, it was unsettling. Ethan sat at the kitchen table with his service laptop open, reviewing old reports from Max's last operation. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitating. Part of him wanted to dive into the data timeline, drug raid, explosion. But the other part already knew the facts wouldn't change. Max had vanished until now. A knock broke the silence. Not loud, just intentional. One solid rap, then a pause. Another knock firmer. Ethan's head snapped up. He moved to the front hallway, quietly pulling open the drawer beneath the key rack and retrieving his sidearm, sliding it into the holster under his flannel shirt. He opened the door slowly, keeping his hand near his hip. At the end of his gravel driveway sat a black SUV, engine idling low, headlights off. Snow clung to its tinted windows and steel grille. The kind of vehicle that didn't belong in rural neighborhoods, too new, too silent, too out of place. A man stood in the porch light, his breath puffing out in small clouds. He was tall and heavy-set with a shaved head and ink crawling up his thick neck. He wore a leather vest over a camo hoodie, jeans soaked at the cuffs, and heavy boots streaked with slush. On one hand he wore black gloves. The other held a cigarette burning low between his fingers. "Evening," he said. His voice was growly like tires on an unpaved road. "You, Ethan Cole?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. "Depends who's asking." The man stepped closer, boots crunching snow. "Name's Marcus Hale. You bought a dog yesterday." "Big one, scarred up, gray and gold coat." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "That dog ain't yours," Marcus said. "One of my guys sold it without permission. I'm here to collect what's mine." Ethan took a slow breath, resisting the urge to glance inside toward Max. The man who sold him didn't mention a name. "Just said the dog was a stray." Marcus smirked. "That was Kenny, I bet." "Stupid little punk. Thought he could pocket some cash. But that dog, he's property. My property." "What kind of operation are you running where a dog comes with scars like that?" Ethan asked, tone sharpening. Marcus's smile dropped. You ask too many questions for someone standing alone on a porch in the dark. Ethan didn't flinch. You want the dog? Bring a warrant. Marcus exhaled smoke into the wind. You're making a mistake. You don't know what that animal's been through. Neither do you, Ethan said quietly. Not really. Marcus took a step back. You got 24 hours to change your mind. After that, well, things get messy. He flicked the cigarette into the snow, turned, and walked back to the SUV. Before the door closed, he looked over his shoulder. You'll regret this, officer. The SUV rolled back down the driveway, tires crunching snow, disappearing into the dark like a shadow swallowed by deeper shadow. Ethan stood still until the red taillights vanished. Then he went inside and shut the door quietly behind him. Max hadn't moved. He was still lying by the window, completely silent. No growl, no bark, nothing. It was like he hadn't even noticed the threat outside. Ethan crouched beside him. You didn't even react, he murmured. You used to go stiff if someone so much as coughed near this house. Max blinked slowly. Ethan stood, went to the closet, and retrieved a small lockbox. Inside was a basic home security kit, a weatherproof camera and motion sensor he'd meant to install months ago. He took it outside and mounted it under the porch eaves facing the drive. The air was cold against his skin, but his mind was already calculating. Back inside, he input the camera's serial number into his home system and set the feed to run a continuous backup loop. Then he returned to the kitchen, sat back at the table and opened a secure channel to the police vehicle registry system. He typed in the partial plate he'd caught from the SUV as it drove off. The system spun. A hit returned. Registered to a defunct security company in Commerce City. No active business license. No contact info. Classic cover. He made a note. In the other room, Max shifted. A slow rise. A circle on the rug. Then he lay back down. Still no signs of anxiety or guard instinct. Ethan leaned back in the chair, rubbing his jaw. He knew now this wasn't a misunderstanding. The dog hadn't just been a stray. Someone had trained Max for something else, and they weren't going to let him go without a fight. The next morning, the sky over Denver was a dull pewter blanket, heavy with the promise of more snow. Wind blew through the trees around Ethan's property. But inside his truck, the heater hummed as he drove toward the University Research District. In the back seat lay Max, silent as ever, his copper eyes scanning the world beyond the window, but not seeming to connect with it. He hadn't made a sound since the confrontation with Marcus the night before. Not a growl, not a whine, just silence. Ethan glanced at him through the rearview mirror. The dog's body was massive, broader than he remembered Max ever being. His muscles were thick, almost unnaturally so, and there was a stiffness in his gait that hadn't been there in the old days. It wasn't age, it was something else. He pulled into a restricted parking space behind a modern glass-paneled building marked Colorado Veterinary Sciences and Neural Research Facility, a state-of-the-art lab housed within the university system. Anna Brooks worked here. She didn't just treat animals. She studied them, especially those affected by trauma, memory loss, or neurological experiments gone wrong. Ethan parked and opened the door. Come on, buddy. Max stepped down slowly, his paws heavy on the concrete. He didn't resist the leash, but didn't walk with eagerness either, just a strange, obedient calm. They entered through the back, where security already knew Ethan from past cases. A tall woman waited just inside the secondary lab doors, arms folded over a white lab coat. Dr. Anna Brooks, late 30s, stood with the kind of posture that came from always having something to prove. She was about 5'10", lean and angular, with dark chestnut hair tied in a bun and a few rogue strands framing her sharp face. Her hazel eyes were keen and intelligent, but never unkind. You weren't kidding, she said, eyeing Max. Ash walked in. That's not just any shepherd. He hasn't barked once since I got him, Ethan replied, and he didn't react to a direct threat last night. You'll want to see what's under his fur. Anna gestured toward the exam room. Bring him in. Inside, the space was clean and clinical steel counters, LED lights, and the faint smell of antiseptic. Anna gently instructed Max to step onto the exam platform. He didn't resist. She gave Ethan a glance. That obedience, it's not normal for a stray. Even if he were trained, the passivity is off. She pulled on gloves and ran her hands along Max's spine, then under his neck. You said you found a tattoo? Ethan nodded. K9 7D611. That was Max's code. Anna turned to the side counter, picked up a handheld scanner, and activated the low-frequency signal. She ran it over Max's shoulder. Nothing. Then she moved slightly lower toward the chest area just above the right leg. Beep. A faint signal. Anna frowned and looked at the screen. This isn't a standard K9 chip. This frequency is weird. It's encrypted. Almost military grade, but not matching any registry. She pressed a button and magnified the signal range, then looked up. Something's embedded under the skin, Ethan tensed. Trackable? Possibly, but also it might not be legal. Hold on. She stepped out and returned moments later with a small medical kit and a precision scalpel. Ethan hesitated. Is it safe? I'll sedate him lightly. Local only. He won't feel a thing. She administered a quick injection behind Max's ear. The dog blinked slowly and relaxed. Then Anna carefully cut a thin line above the area where the signal came from. Beneath the skin was a dark metallic node no larger than a rice grain shaped like a microchip, but with sharp edges and copper threading. She extracted it with tweezers and dropped it into a lead-lined tray. Ethan leaned in. That's not police. Issue. No, Anna said grimly. It's not. And I've seen something like it before in illegal underground labs that test combat enhancements on animals. What kind of enhancements? Strength, pain resistance, memory suppression, behavioral resets. Basically turn a working dog into a fighting dog. She looked at Ethan. This wasn't just about wiping his memories. This was about turning him into a weapon. Ethan rubbed his forehead, silent for a long moment. Anna turned back to Max, running her hands along the thick muscles in his shoulders. These aren't from training. His muscle mass is beyond what a normal shepherd would develop. Even with hard work, he's been chemically enhanced. Hormonal injections, maybe even gene editing. Ethan's jaw tightened. So, someone took Max after the explosion, erased his memory, jacked up his body, and tried to turn him into a killer. Anna nodded. Looks that way, but for some reason it didn't work. He's emotionally flat. No aggression, no anxiety, nothing. He's not dead inside, Ethan said softly. He still recognizes things, just not fully. Anna gave him a long look. There's a chance we can reverse some of it. But more importantly, Ethan, if they did this to Max, they might be doing it to others. Ethan straightened. Then we need to find out who they are. Anna nodded. I have some contacts. A couple of university researchers and a non-profit that tracks illegal animal testing. If we trace the chip serial build and the enhancements used, we might be able to locate the lab where this was done. She cleaned and bandaged Max's incision, then gently stroked his head. He's lucky you found him. Ethan watched the dog stir slowly as the sedative wore off. Max lifted his head and blinked, locking eyes with Ethan for the briefest moment. Something passed between them, a flicker of recognition. Ethan crouched beside him. We're going to figure this out, he said. And if they're still out there, they're not getting you back. Max didn't wag his tail, but he didn't look away either. It was a start. The morning sun hovered low over the snow-covered trees, casting long, pale beams across the backyard of Ethan Cole's house. The snow from the night before had stopped, leaving behind a thin crust of frost over the grass and porch railing. It was bitter cold, the kind that numbed your fingers even through gloves. But Ethan was already out in the yard, bundled in his thick sheriff's coat, a thermos of coffee steaming on the back steps. The yard wasn't large, fenced in open space with Asmol's storage shed at the far end, an old picnic table, and a makeshift agility course Ethan had half-built years ago for Max during training off days. It had gone unused for a long time. Now it was time to bring it back to life. Max stood a few feet away, still and quiet. His massive frame was calm but unreadable, his coat catching the light in shades of slate gray and gold. Thescars along his flanks were more visible in the daylight, raised lines of memory etched into his skin. His ears flicked at the chirp of a bird overhead, but he made no move. Ethan adjusted the worn utility vest in his hands. It was the same one Max used to wear, Slightly faded now, still bearing the patch. K9 Unit, Denver County. He crouched down and held it out. "You remember this?" he asked softly. Max stepped forward, sniffed the vest. He paused, head cocking slightly, then looked away. Ethan sighed and set the vest on the snow-dusted bench. A door creaked open behind him. Dr. Anna Brooks stepped outside, holding a small cooler and a set of vials. She wore a charcoal gray jacket over her lab scrubs, her cheeks pink from the cold. Her hair was pulled back in its usual half-messy bun, a few strands already escaping into the breeze. She wasn't dressed for the outdoors, but stubbornness had never been her weakness. "I brought the scent triggers and audio cues," she said, lifting the cooler slightly. "Straight from the old K9 archive room. Took me 2 hours to convince the archivist I wasn't trying to train an army." Ethan cracked a smile. He probably wasn't far off. Anna walked over and opened the cooler, revealing several sealed scent jars in a compact speaker. "These are synthetic recreations of common scent markers, gunpowder, narcotics, human sweat. Same mixes we used during training in the early days. And the speaker has recordings of old command cues, handler calls, even sirens. Familiar sounds might trigger latent memory." She handed him a clicker remote. "Use this for reinforcement. Pair the scent with the cue. Don't rush it." Ethan nodded and turned to Max. "Ready to try something, partner?" The dog looked at him, head tilting ever so slightly. Ethan started simple. He took a small scent pad, soaked in diluted powder residue, placed it near the base of a low training cone, and stepped back. "Max," he said calmly, pointing at the cone. "Sit." The dog didn't move. Ethan repeated the command. "Sit." There was a long pause, then the faintest shift. Max lowered his hindquarters slowly, not fluidly, but with effort. His eyes stayed locked on Ethan the entire time. "That's it," Ethan said softly. "Good boy." He clicked the remote and tossed a small treat. Max caught it mid-air with practiced reflex, then stood again, tail giving a slight twitch. Anna watched carefully from the side. "That wasn't just reaction," she said. "He was thinking through it." Searching, Ethan continued the process, introducing the scent, giving the command down. "Stay. Come." The responses were inconsistent, delayed, but they were there. Max hesitated, but the muscle memory was awakening. Each successful response was followed by a treat and quiet praise. Slowly, something began to return. Not full recognition, but instinct. By the end of the first hour, Max was obeying sit, down, and stay with decent accuracy. Heel took longer, and protect brought a moment of confusion. He circled Ethan once, then stood beside him, ears high, gaze alert. "That's protective posture," Anna noted, surprised. "He's remembering how to guard." Ethan crouched beside Max and gently patted his side. "You still got it in you, don't you?" The dog didn't respond with affection, but he didn't move away either. That was new. As the session ended, Ethan walked over to the porch and sat on the step, wiping sweat from his brow despite the cold. Max stood near the fence, watching a crow own a branch. The posture was different now. Head up, ears perked, body slightly forward, not passive, not dead-eyed. Anna joined Ethan on the step, arms crossed. "You know," she said, "if you keep this up, he might just remember who he was. It'll take time. Some neurons there probably permanently altered. But there's something under all that conditioning." Ethan looked at her, something softer in his eyes. "Thanks for coming out today." She shrugged. "Wasn't just for you." He smiled faintly. "Still, it's good having you here." Like old times, Anna didn't reply at first. Then she said, "It's funny. Used to think working with animals was easier because they couldn't talk back. Now I realize they're the ones who listen best." They sat in silence for a while, watching Max track the bird's movements. Eventually, Ethan stood and gave Max a short whistle. The dog turned instantly. Ethan smiled. "Now that's the dog I remember." The snow had begun to fall heavier by nightfall, thick flakes swirling under the golden porch light like ash in a winter fire. Wind clawed through the pine trees surrounding Ethan Cole's house, and the distant howl of it against the eaves made the place feel more isolated than ever. Inside, warmth clung to the walls, lamplight glowing low, a kettle just starting to hiss on the stove, and Max curled near the front door, his body relaxed, but his eyes alert. Anna Brooks stood at the window, arms crossed over her chest, staring out into the swirling snow. Her features were tighter than usual. The tension had settled in her jaw, her hazel eyes flicking between shadows, as if they could hear the past returning. Her lab coat was gone, replaced by a thick wool sweater, but her hands were still wrapped around a small vial left over from the day's training work. "They'll come back," she said quietly, not looking away from the window. Ethan, seated at the kitchen table cleaning his service weapon, nodded. "I know. He had been thinking about it all day." Marcus Hale wasn't the kind of man to walk away empty-handed. And after the progress Max had made this morning, Ethan wasn't about to lose him again. Not to some thug's leash, and not Ophir. Ethan stood, holstered his gun, and walked toward the hallway closet. From behind a row of coats, he pulled out a battered duffel bag and set it on the floor. Inside were spare magazines, zip ties, flashlights, a bulletproof vest, and a small pump-action shotgun. Anna turned from the window just as headlights lit the trees beyond the driveway. They weren't moving, just sitting there silent. Then the SUV pulled forward, creeping slowly down Thesey Path until it stopped just beyond the porch steps. The engine idled low. The beams of the headlights cut through the living room windows, making Ethan's home look like a stage waiting for violence to enter. Ethan moved to the wall and flicked the interior lights off. The house fell into darkness, the only illumination now coming from the fireplace, and the occasional flicker of snow reflected beams. He reached for Anna and gently pulled her down behind the dining table. "Stay low," he whispered. She crouched beside him, tucking the vial away and pulling her phone out, fingers flying across the screen as she activated a silent GPS ping to her university lab's emergency contact, a backup protocol, in case Cheever found herself in danger while working with illegal case evidence. Ethan tapped his own phone, a direct line to dispatch, his voice low and clipped. "This is Lieutenant Ethan Cole. Officers requested. Possible home invasion. Coordinates transmitting. Hostile presence confirmed. I need backup. Snowfall's heavy, so estimate time accordingly." He ended the call and pocketed the phone. Outside, the SUV door slammed, then another, then another. Shadows moved just beyond the light. 3 figures bundled in thick coats and hoods spread out toward the house. One of them held a crowbar. Another had a bat slung over his shoulder. The third was bulkier and carried what looked like a saw-off shotgun wrapped in a canvas sleeve. Max, who had been lying still until now, rose slowly to his feet. He walked toward the window, eyes locked on the movement outside. His muscles tensed, his tail stiffened. Anna watched him carefully. "Ethan, I see it." Max stood beside the window for a moment, then turned and walked slowly toward Anna. He stopped in front of her, planted his body like a wall, and let out a low, throaty growl. It was deep, instinctive, familiar. Ethan's eyes narrowed. That sound, he hadn't heard it since the warehouse 3 years ago. The first bang hit the side window hard. Glass cracked but didn't shatter. Max barked. Not a confused yelp or startled bark. A K9 command barked, short, hard, authoritative. The second bang came from the rear. Then a voice outside, muffled but rough. "Break the damn window." Max launched forward, jumping up onto the coffee table, barking loud now, head turning toward the side entrance. The third hit shattered the window. A gloved hand reached in. Ethan raised his weapon and fired once. A warning shot into the ceiling. The invaders ducked, but one of them didn't wait. The front door buckled. Once, twice. On the third strike, the latch cracked. The door flew open. Snow blasted inward, and a heavy-set man in a black ski mask stepped through, raising a metal pipe. Max flew at him like a thunderbolt. The shepherd's teeth clamped down on the attacker's forearm, dragging the man sideways into the wall. The man screamed, trying to swing the pipe, but Max held firm, snarling, shaking his head. Ethan moved in, kicking the pipe away, and delivered a punch to the attacker's jaw that sent him slumping to the floor. Another man appeared in the doorway. Ethan raised his pistol, but before he could fire, Anna hurled a fire extinguisher straight into the man's chest. The canister exploded in a white cloud, filling the entryway with a choking fog. "Move!" Ethan shouted. He grabbed Anna's wrist, and with Max still growling low and backing toward them, they made their way to the storage room near the back of the house. Ethan slammed the door shut and dropped the crossbar across it. They were boxed in, but for now, safe. In the silence that followed, only Max's breathing broke the stillness. He stood facing the door, teeth bared, muscles taut. The barking outside was now human panicked voices arguing, one of them yelling, "Cops!" They called the cops. Then the roar of tires and snow. From a distance, a wailing siren began to build. Faint at first, then louder. Anna leaned against the wall, heart pounding. Max slowly relaxed, but he didn't step away from the door. When the SUV's engine faded into the distance, Ethan unbarred the door and moved into the hallway, pistols still raised. The living room was in chaos. Broken glass, burn marks from a tossed flare, and a scattered debris covered the floor. Max padded slowly to his side. Blood streaked his coat from the attacker's arm, not his own. His eyes were bright, focused, alert. Anna stepped beside Ethan and looked down at the damage, then at Max. "He's back," she whispered. "Or at least he's trying." Ethan crouched, placed a hand on Max's head. "Good boy, Max." For the first time, the dog let out a soft, throaty bark and wagged his tail. The sun had barely risen over the frost-tipped trees lining the South Platte River when the convoy rolled out. 3 unmarked black SUVs and a tactical van pulling up along a dirt road behind a cluster of abandoned grain silos and warehouses. The area had once been part of Denver's old industrial district, now long forgotten, reclaimed by rust and shadows. It was the kind of place people didn't visit unless they had something to hide. Inside the lead vehicle, Ethan Cole sat behind the wheel, his expression tight. He wore his tactical vest over a thermal base layer. The Denver County Sheriff's star stitched on his shoulder. His eyes flicked to the rear-view mirror where Max sat in the back, ears high, eyes sharp, no hesitation, no dullness, just focus. Anna Brooks had stayed behind at the mobile command post set up a mile away. She had spent the last 48 hours sorting through data from the illegal chip they had removed from Max metadata, serial codes, frequency patterns. That led them here to a warehouse registered under a fake name, flagged for irregular power usage, and heat signatures that didn't match the building's apparent vacancy. Through Ethan's earpiece came the voice of Sergeant Daryl Torres, a seasoned SWAT team leader in his mid-40s with a solid build and a reputation for cool logic under fire. His salt-and-pepper buzz-cut and sun-darkened skin gave him the look of someone who'd spent more time outside than in. He was gruff, but his team trusted him with their lives. "Cole, you sure that the dog can track this?" Ethan glanced back at Max. "I'm not following him. He's following them. Trust me, he remembers more than we thought." Torres gave the go-ahead. They moved in. Max led the team through a narrow service entrance near the back of the property. The cold wind howled through broken panes of glass, and the air stank of oil, rust, and the faint metallic scent of blood and bleach. The warehouse was vast and dark, with crates stacked haphazardly along the walls, and cages, rows of them, covered with tarps lining the far end. Max paused, nose twitching. Then he moved low, deliberate steps toward the eastern wall. Ethan followed with his sidearm raised. 2 deputies flanking him in tight formation. They reached a metal door partially ajar. Max stopped, growled low, and looked up at Ethan. Ethan gave the signal. The door burst open. Inside was a crude training pit, steel walls reinforced with plywood. The floor stained with years of sweat and worse. Dozens of cages lined the perimeter. In each one, a dog sat or stood silent watching. German Shepherds, Belgian Malinois Dobermans, all bore scars, clipped ears, tattooed ID codes, and a look Ethan recognized too well. Obedience born from suffering. Max padded in ahead of them, nose twitching, eyes scanning. Then he barked once, loud, sharp. In the far cage, one of the shepherds stood and wagged its tail. Max walked straight to it, sat and barked again, less aggressive this time. Ethan moved quickly, unlocking the cage and inspecting the tag on the dog's collar. "This one's registered. K9 Unit Boise, Idaho. Reported stolen 18 months ago." The realization hit like a punch. "These aren't strays," Ethan muttered. "They're all former canines taken." Reprogrammed, Torres's voice came through the comm again. Teams 2 and 3 are in position. 2 tangos spotted near the west stairwell. Ethan responded, "Tell them to hold fire unless engaged. We need evidence, not corpses." At the center of the warehouse, a door slammed. Footsteps echoed. Then, shouting fast, angry, a man emerged from the stairwell with the 2 others behind him. The leader was tall, lean, and dressed in tactical black armor, boots, and gloves. His name was Roy Maddox, a former private contractor turned underground handler. Early 50s, slicked-back silver hair, deep-set eyes, and a permanent sneer. He'd once trained dogs for overseas security forces until he was dishonorably discharged for abuse and unauthorized experimentation. Maddox saw Ethan and froze. "So," he said coolly, "you found us." Ethan didn't lower his weapon. "You've got 20 dogs in cages, K9 units from across 5 states. You're done." Maddox chuckled. "That's where you're wrong. You only found 1 site." He gestured subtly, and one of his men raised a weapon. Ethan reacted fast. "Now!" A flashbang went off to the right, lighting the room in a white burst. Gunfire erupted from the catwalk above. Torres's team swept in through the upper windows, rappelling down, firing controlled shots that echoed like thunder. Max growled and lunged toward Maddox's man with the weapon, who had taken cover behind a crate. Ethan lost sight of him in the chaos. Someone grabbed Ethan from behind. He struggled, elbowed hard, and turned only to see Maddox with a knife drawn. Before he could raise his pistol, Max launched into Maddox's side, teeth sinking into his shoulder, dragging him down. The 2 rolled across the floor. Maddox screamed, trying to jab at the dog, but Max had found his rhythm. He was fast, precise, no longer a shadow of his former self, but a K9 officer restored. Ethan kicked the knife from Maddox's hand and pinned him. "You don't get to run this time." Minutes later, the warehouse fell silent. SWAT officers secured the perimeter. Anna arrived with 2 agents from the local Bureau of Animal Law Enforcement, bringing transport crates and documentation. She walked into the main floor, eyes widening as she saw the cages. Oh my God, they weren't just training them. They were breaking them. Ethan looked down at Max, whose fur was strewn with blood not his own. The shepherd stood tall, tail still, breath steady. He was back. The cold had begun to lift in Denver, though patches of snow still clung to the corners of sidewalks and shaded lawns. At the edge of the city, just beyond the commercial strip and brick apartment blocks, the Denver Police K9 training facility stretched across 5 acres of open space, an old airfield converted into a sanctuary of discipline and purpose. Today the grounds buzzed not with drills but with quiet celebration. Ethan stood near the central training yard, his uniform pressed, the sheriff's star gleaming in the late morning sun. His stance was relaxed, but his eyes tracked every movement of the German shepherd pacing beside him. Max, fully groomed now, his sable-black coat catching flecks of light, moved with the sharp, deliberate confidence of a dog who had reclaimed not just his identity, but his mission. It had taken weeks of exercises, scent drills, obstacle courses, tactical response tests, and through each trial Max had not only responded, he had led. The hesitation that once haunted him had vanished, replaced with fierce precision, and the occasional flick of his tail, as if reminding Ethan, "I remember now." In those early days, no one had dared hope for a full recovery. The trauma Max endured, the memory wipes, the violent retraining, the betrayal of trust would have broken most animals. But Max was an ordinary dog. He had always been different. Loyal beyond comprehension, smart enough to adapt, strong enough to heal. A few yards away, Anna Brooks stood beside a group of uniformed officers and civilians. She wore a navy blue blouse tucked into gray slacks, a simple silver chain resting against her collarbone. Her long brown hair was pulled into a neat braid, her eyes sharp behind thin-rimmed glasses. But it was the pride in her smile that made her unforgettable. She had been more than a vet, more than a researcher, more than a friend. She had become a cornerstone in both Ethan's and Max's recovery. As the ceremony began, Captain Janice Reynolds, a tall, broad-shouldered black woman in her 50s, with a commanding presence and a non-nonsense demeanor, took the podium. A 25-year veteran of the Denver PD, she had overseen countless operations. But a day her voice softened. "We are gathered not only to honor service," she began, "but to recognize resilience, partnership, and redemption." Behind her, a digital screen played images from the takedown of Roy Maddox's operation. Grainy footage of locked cages, faces of the rescued K9s, photos of Max during his recovery. Thanks to the bravery of Lieutenant Ethan Cole, the skill of Dr. Anna Brooks, and the courage of a dog who refused to give up, she continued, we were able to bring a criminal network to justice, rescue over 20 dogs, and return a lost hero to his rightful place. She turned and gestured. "Max, come." The crowd parted as Ethan gave a quiet command. Max trotted forward, posture proud, tail held high. He approached the stage steps, paused, then climbed each paw placed with almost ceremonial precision. The applause was thunderous. Cameras flashed. A child in the front row clapped so hard her mittens fell off. Captain Reynolds knelt and attached a special silver badge to Max's collar, engraved with a single word: valor. Ethan watched with glassy eyes. He didn't hide it. For 3 years he had believed Max was gone forever, either dead or broken beyond repair. Now that same dog stood like a sentinel at the heart of the department, hailed as both survivor and savior. Later that afternoon, a smaller reception was held inside the training facility's main hall. Coffee steamed in paper cups. Conversations flowed freely. Ethan stood near the windows with Anna, both watching Max as he sat surrounded by officers gently tolerating children petting his ears. "So," Anna said, sipping her drink, "what happens now?" "Back to the old routine." Ethan smiled. "Somewhat. He's not going into raids anytime soon, but we'll train the new pups together. He'll lead. I'll follow." She nodded. "He deserves that." A brief silence passed between them. Not awkward, but full. Something had changed since that night of the attack. Not just in Max, in them. When fear had pushed them into the same corner of the house, it had forced something deeper to surface. Trust. Ethan looked at her, his voice gentler than before. "I was thinking maybe we should make it official." She raised an eyebrow. "Us?" He laughed. "Well, that too. But I meant the foundation." Anna's eyes lit up. "The K9 Defense Trust?" Exactly. A fund for retired service dogs, medical care, rehoming, even legal protection. "I love it," she said immediately, "and I'll run it." "I was hoping you'd say that." Just then, Captain Reynolds approached, followed by a local news reporter holding a notepad. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, "but they want a few photos of the three of you for the article." "Hope that's all right." Anna smiled. Ethan nodded. Max walked up and sat obediently between them as the camera clicked. For a moment, everything stilled. A soldier, a scientist, and a dog, all forever changed by a chain of events that had started with a single silent bark in the dark. Sometimes the miracles we pray for don't arrive with thunder or lightning, but with the silent steps of a wounded dog finding his way home. Max wasn't just a K9 unit. He was a symbol of loyalty that refused to die, even when his memory did. And maybe that's how God works too. Not always loud, not always fast, but always faithful in a world where things are often broken, stolen, or forgotten. This story reminds us that redemption is real, that memories can return, and that even when hope seems lost, God is still writing the ending. Not every wound heals cleanly, not every chapter makes sense at first. But in the hands of a faithful Creator, even pain becomes part of a greater plan. So if you believe that loyalty matters, if you believe that second chances are sacred, and if you believe that God still sends His angels sometimes with paws and scars, then leave a comment below and type Amen. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder that they are not alone. Comment Amen. If you believe in miracles, subscribe to our channel for more stories of hope, healing, and the quiet heroes among us. May God bless you and your family wherever you are in the world.